So get off already? Okay, am I mic'd? I am, great. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third talk in the Software Development Forum series on the future of software development, co-hosted by the Computer History Museum. I'm Sanford Rockowitz, chair of the series. We have a few brief introductions, and then we will get to the meat of tonight's presentation. First, I'd like to bring up Karen Haley, Managing Director of Software Development Forum, to say a few words.
Yay! All right, well, thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Welcome. For those of, how many people here are actually SD Forum members? All right, so I kind of don't really have to tell you who we are, but I will anyway. So the brief version. We're an unbiased source of information and insight into the technology community. We are here to provide resources for you guys to drive innovation in Silicon Valley and keep it moving even in these challenging times. And I'm just thrilled tonight that Sandy has put a tremendous amount of work into lining up the speakers, and especially the caliber that we have tonight. And I know Chuck's going to talk some about Alan's background, but we're thrilled to have him. We have a visionary event every year where we recognize high-profile people in the industry who have accomplished a great deal in moving technology forward, and Alan Cooper was one of our visionaries a few years back, so we're thrilled to have him this evening. And I'm going to turn it back over to Sandy and keep this evening moving.
Great. Thanks, Karen. Well, now I want to bring up our other Karen Matthews, who's Executive Vice President of the Computer History Museum. And the Computer History Museum is, as I said, co-hosting the series and also videotaping the talks for your archives.
We're very happy to co-host this event with the SD Forum. Sandy Rockowitz and the Forum people have done, as you can see, a stellar job in setting up a great program. And as Sandy said, we're videotaping this presentation, and it will be kept in the museum's archive. As I told Alan tonight when I asked him to sign the release, long after we're around to do the remembering. So I hope I'm assuming correctly that most of the people here know about the museum already. So I wasn't going to go into details about our interesting programs, our vast collection, and our mission, which is to preserve and present the artifacts and stories of the information age. If you don't know about us, well, got a treat in store for you. It's probably the most, in my opinion, my humble opinion, the most exciting museum project, certainly in the States and probably the world. There's some literature out in the lobby that you can look at, our quarterly publication Core, or you can come and talk to me if you'd like after the lecture. So I wanted to tell you about our big news, which is that we have recently purchased a landmark 119,000 square foot building at Highway 101 and Shoreline Boulevard, and this is to become the museum's permanent home. We'd originally planned to... We're going to occupy this building in stages. The first one will be in May, approximately, of 2003 when we open our beta museum. That will include about 15,000 square feet of open collection where we'll have highlights of the collection on display, and also a 400-seat auditorium. So maybe you'll be visiting us for some of these SD Forum events in the future. Right now, we have underway the schematic design, which is the rough layout and look of the exhibits that will go into phase 2, which comes along several years later. The timeline right now is what we're working on, which is going to show the highlights and kind of milestones of computer history, and that'll be 15,000 square feet. And then we will also have 5 theme galleries where we can delve into specific topics in more detail. Meanwhile, you can still visit us and view the collection at Moffett Field. There are almost always new things on display, and we hold events there sometimes too, so that'll be open until May. And you can visit us on the website, computerhistory.org, and I've got to do my museumly duty and mention that we are largely individual member supported with people just like you and me. And so we ask you to consider supporting us in some way, being a volunteer, and getting involved with the museum. Thanks.
Wait, where's that for Chuck? As most of you know, and I'll try to be brief about it as a result, the talks in this series are intended to answer from a variety of perspectives the following simple, but I think essential question. What is it that leading edge developers should be paying attention to, and why is it important? To address this question, we've assembled what we think are a group of technical luminaries, people who've had a major impact on how software is created and who continue in their work to shape how software developers think about and practice their craft. Next year, our series resumes on January 24th, with Richard Gabriel, Sun Distinguished Engineer and author of the widely cited paper, Worse is Better. The topic of Richard's talk will be the road not traveled. And in that talk, he intends to argue that our existing software development methodologies and languages, based on metaphors from mathematics and engineering, are inadequate for creating safe, easy-to-use systems, and that we need to look for new directions from the ways less traveled, from biology, from physics, and from complexity theory. Also on tap next year, though we haven't quite fit the specific speakers to the specific dates at this point, are Kent Beck, arguably the leading proponent of extreme programming, Jim Gray, Microsoft Distinguished Engineer and perhaps best known as the father of two-phase commit, and Charles Simoni, who started his career, or early on in his career was here at PARC, developed the Bravo editor, went on to Microsoft, basically spearheaded Microsoft Word, and has just founded a new corporation called Intentional Software, intended to explore new paradigms in software development. To introduce Alan, I've asked Chuck Berg to come up. Chuck is Vice President of Engineering at Rockcliffe, and he also, for several years, was President of the Software Entrepreneurs Forum, the predecessor organization for one of the predecessor organizations for the Software Development Forum. So Chuck has worked with Alan as part of Software Development Forum for many years, so I thought I'd bring Chuck up to do the introduction.
Thank you, Sandy. When Sandy asked me to do this introduction this morning, I had two thoughts. The first was that 2 months ago at the inaugural event in this series, Alan introduced Grady Booch and had the audience almost on the floor with laughter because the introduction was so great. I have no expectations of accomplishing that. The second reaction that I had was that, as Sandy said, the reason that he asked me to do this introduction is because both Alan and I have a long history with the Software Development Forum and its predecessor organization. Alan was actually the founder of the Windows SIG. I'm now the chairman of the Windows SIG. He served for several years on the board of directors. I also served for a couple of years on the board of directors. Alan is currently an advisor to the organization, and I serve on the organization's executive committee. I'm actually awed that I can say that I'm in such company as Alan Cooper. Alan's work work with visual programming early on was married with Quick Basic in order to create the product that we now know as Visual Basic. For this effort, Alan received the Microsoft Windows Pioneer Award and is known in the industry by the handle of the father of Visual Basic. Sometimes I think he objects to that fatherhood term. Subsequently, Alan has become focused on how to effectively design user interactions, and in fact even coined that term, user interaction, to emphasize the importance of early, deep design of user experiences as opposed to slapping a skin-deep user interface on top of a system that fundamentally doesn't really meet the user's need. I always kind of chuckle at him referring to this as putting lipstick on a pig, because the pig is still ugly and now it's annoyed. Alan is a frequent speaker at industry conferences. He's written a number of magazine articles and 2 influential books, About Face, The Essentials of Interface Design, and The Inmates Are Running the Asylum, Why High-Tech Products Drive Us Crazy, and How to Restore the Sanity. I'm quite proud to say that my autographed copies of those 2 books are among my most prized possessions in my bookcase. Alan is the recipient of numerous industry awards. I'll mention just 2. In February of 2001, eWeek magazine identified Alan as one of the 25 movers and shakers who would most affect the evolution of technology in 2001. And 2 years ago, Software Development Forum honored Alan with its Software Visionary Award. Alan may be a bit of a curmudgeon, but he's a man with a mission, and that is to create systems that serve people, not the other way around. I give you Alan Cooper.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Sandy and Karen. And can I dispose of one of these computers here?
I don't know if I want you quite
Dispose. We give it to HP. They are in the business of disposing of computers. This is what's called the technical interlude. Now we must cross our fingers and hope that it comes to life. So, is the audio, Deanna, is the audio turned up? Seeing as the Computer History Museum is going to be videotaping this, I thought as means of my own self-introduction, I would play a videotape made for me as my Christmas present last year by my 14-year-old son.
Yo, his name's Alan, Big Al the Fly Daddy. He raps with no worries as good as Puff Daddy. He sits at his desk and works, drinking coffee for his perks. After he wrote Visual Basic, his life became pretty sick. On his index finger, he's got a ring, cause he's so bling bling. Listening to Jimmy Buffett and trying to sing. November 2-1 Charlie Tango. 280 is as fast as his plane go. He been flying for 20 years, never flying and drinking beers. He don't do it like that. He does it like his fat cat. Her name is Lucy. He likes grapefruits cause they're juicy. Juicy. He's got a gorgeous wife named Sue. When they were young, they would sniff glue. At least they didn't sniff poo. Ew. Austin Powers is his movie. He thinks it's very groovy. He thinks Dr. Evil is the best, cause he ain't like the rest. And he's bald, not like the rest of the world. Except Alan, cause he's original. He's so visual, basic. Just face it, Alan is the bomb. He's right up there with Sue Bomb. He cooks using tongs. I hope he never cooks using thongs. That would be wrong. Wrong. Always cooking good meals, rolling on high-class wheels. It's his Pathfinder. He likes his DVD player cause he don't have to rewind his videotape. He just watches and eats his grapes with the controls on his belly. On his toast, he's got jelly. Jelly.
So, stand up, Marty. Yeah, I'm proud of that. Yeah. Thank you for letting me do that. I do that because I know you're all my personal friends. I have just a couple of announcements to make. Cooper has my company, Cooper, is a consulting company, and we have spent the last 10 years developing some innovative and remarkably effective methods for doing interaction design. And in the interests of getting them out there and making some money while nobody's buying consulting, we've created a thing called Cooper U, and we're training people like you in our methodology. And what we're offering right now is there's some flyers out there on the table. Is a 5-day practicum. It's an intensive, hands-on, 16-person maximum, in-depth study of our interaction design methodology, the goal-directed method. And if you're interested, you can ask me or send me email or go to our website. My first book, About Face, which was published in 1995 and is a bit long in the tooth, is in the process right now of being rewritten. And it's going to be republished. It's going to be called About Face 2.0, what else? And it's going to go, well, our deadline is in a couple of weeks, so we're expecting it to be on the shelves sometime in March. There's no doubt that, I look at it and kind of go, it doesn't need an update, it's just fine the way it is, 8 years of technology, that's nothing. But my esteemed colleague, Robert Ryman, who happens to be sitting in the audience, a brilliant man, a guy who's worked with me at Cooper for over 5 years now, and who has really taken some of my original thoughts about interaction design and taken it much farther than I ever could, has been the man who's been driving the rewrite. And the original About Face was a polemic. That was my purpose. The idea was a big fat book that you could whack people upside the head with, And so the writing was in keeping with that idea. And Robert, however, is much more like a college professor, you see. And he has brought a much cooler, more rational voice to the book. And I think the combination of our two voices has really done a good thing for the book. And the book is completely rewritten. It's completely reorganized and rearranged. We threw out about a third of it at least, and added at least another third. There's 7 brand new chapters, and so I'm very excited about it, and I would recommend it to you. Thank you for letting me offer those little commercials. Many months ago, Sandy asked me to speak here, and I said sure, and I said, well, I would give, I sort of have a kind of a standard talk that evolves as I go, and I was going to give that presentation, a truly brilliant and exciting presentation. But I decided just the other day to chuck it completely and come up with something completely new. And so that's what I'm going to do tonight. That's why this talk is called Imagine This. I programmed for 20 years, from the early 70s to the early 90s. I built a lot of software, I learned a lot, and about 10 years ago, I quit programming completely to focus on this interaction design stuff. I wanted to delve into the questions of how is it that we determine what we build, rather than how is it we build it once it's been determined, or what it is defaulted to. And so over the last decade, I've talked to a lot of non-programmers. I've talked to a lot of product development people and managers, executives, marketing people, and of course in my position of august authority, I've talked to a lot of programmers, but I haven't listened to them. And it's much more interesting, of course, to be the student than to be the teacher. So I did a remarkable thing about 3 months ago, and I started programming again. And it has rocked my world. I'm really enjoying it. I feel in many ways like I'm back in my element. And I also feel like I'm remembering all of the reasons why it frustrated me so. And the example I used to give is programming is like digging the Panama Canal with a teaspoon. And in Windows, it's like digging the Panama Canal with a one-time fork. Although I have to say that I'm very, very positively impressed with what Microsoft has done with .NET. And .NET has been a good lightning rod for me. I've been able to talk with a lot of my old buddies from the programming world, and I've been listening to them, and I've learned some really remarkable things that have happened. The tools have moved on, but a common thread that I get is just how disappointed and frustrated these top-tier programmers are. They're at the top of their game. They're professionals in the prime of their life. They're the kind of guys who give lectures around the country, around the world. They teach, they consult. And they all seem to be suffering from a kind of ennui. And I see it in what we're doing in the industry, especially now where we're the dominant motivation for what's going on in the software industry seems to be fear. So anyway, I started out by writing a long screed about what's wrong with the industry. And then I threw it away and said, a better approach would be to instead envision what I would like to see and envision that better world. So that's where we come to imagine this. The philosophers say that imagining the future is the first step in making it a reality. And so here's just a few famous philosophers and what they have to say about it. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the whole world. Imagination is a very high sort of seeing. Without this playing with fantasy, no creative work has ever yet come to birth. The debt we owe to the play of imagination is incalculable. And one of my favorites, imagination lays the rails for the reality train. To know is nothing at all. To imagine is everything. And a slight paraphrasing of Albert again, the unleashed power of software has changed everything save our modes of thinking, and we thus drift toward unparalleled catastrophes. So here's the future that I imagine, and I think you'll find that there are some new concepts in here, and I would love to discuss them with you. We should have some time afterwards. So for the interim, please imagine along with me. Imagine a medium composed of pure thought that is perfectly flexible, that is utterly changeable, that is completely invisible, that doesn't have to obey the law of physics, that is constructed purely from the arrangement of logic and intention, that is composed of millions of extremely simple components arranged in fantastically complex ways, that unlike things built from atoms, it has behavior in addition to function. Imagine a factory where there is no variable cost. There's no cost of materials, there's no cost of warehousing, there's no labor cost to build it, there's no cost of materials transportation, and there's no materials waste. Where you can manufacture an infinite number of products instantly, where the cost of building the first manufacturing proof is the sum total of all construction costs, where there is no factory at all. Imagine a distribution network where shipping is free and instantaneous, where there are no middlemen, that allows your product to be centrally upgraded and maintained for essentially no cost, where there's no shipping department at all. Imagine an age when the industrial age is over and buried, where businesses win because of their mastery of information, not of atoms, where successful businesses play by the new rules of the new age and recognize that the old rules of the industrial age are no longer relevant. Imagine a company that is founded to understand and exploit this new age and this fabulous new medium, that believes that long-term success comes from making products that users take delight in, that understands the fundamental economics of the information age are different from those of the industrial age, that understands very few customers are impatient for early delivery of bad software, where the Dilbert comics tacked to cubicle walls are not ironic self-references. Imagine a process that doesn't lie to itself, that doesn't lie to customers or employees or stockholders, that doesn't promise things it knows can never be true, that gives everyone the time, the resources, and respect they need to get their job done well. Imagine a product plan that recognizes the truths of the software construction process, that is clear enough to prevent catastrophes, that every stakeholder has full access to, that every stakeholder understands and agrees to, that describes in detail every aspect of the product's behavior. Imagine a schedule that reflects the actual time to build and not the wishful thinking of impatient business people, that is established only after everyone knows precisely what will be created, that is established only after everyone has had time to verify the schedule is truly achievable, that gives architects enough time to envision and describe the product and its behavior, that gives engineers enough time to find and solve all of the technical problems, that gives programmers enough time to write the code to their highest personal standards, that gives everyone enough time to make the necessary changes and adjustments to assure the highest possible user satisfaction, and that delivers more and better value to market in less time than any unrealistically rushed schedule would. Imagine a product that hides technical minutia instead of amplifying it, that adds flexibility to the user's actions instead of enforcing rigidity, that models information like humans do and not like digital computers do, that works hard to take care of its user instead of vice versa, that never issues error messages because it never lets the user make a mistake, that can undo anything the user has done at any time, that never corrects the user or forces her behavior, that never demands user confirmation, that puts at your fingertips only the things you need and none of the things that everyone else might need. Imagine a business orientation that is committed to long-term success, that recognizes it will be doing whatever it does for a long time, that recognizes long-term success cannot be achieved by short-term goals, that understands relentlessly doing their best for their customers is the quickest and surest route to success, both sooner and later, that acknowledges the overwhelming abundance of proof that first-to-market thinking conveys only insignificant advantage, if any, while at ruinous long-term cost. Imagine a corporate management attitude that admits that managing by feature list and deadline is not really managing at all, that understands that by proceeding with only a vague idea of what it is you are creating, it will take much longer to construct, it will cost much more money, it will be of much lower quality, it will be more vulnerable to competition, it will require more expensive marketing, and it will have a shorter, profitable lifespan. Who understands that shipping late is only a bad thing if you don't understand why you're shipping late. That realizes referring to programming as development allows the programmers to avoid completing its construction. That recognizes that when programmers work without supervision, it guarantees big problems. Imagine an investor who is not afraid, who recognizes how much easier it is to guide companies that are using long-term strategy instead of just short-term tactics, and who values long-term payback. Imagine a philosophy of product management that remembers best to market always trumps first to market. That Google was released after Alta Vista. That Apple was released after DOS. That Microsoft Word was released after WordStar and WordPerfect. And that Microsoft Excel was released after Lotus 1-2-3. And that Lotus 1-2-3 was released after VisiCalc. And that Amazon was released after Virtual Moz. And that Safeway.com was released after WebVan. Imagine a business plan that understands a company is built only once, and its culture and its values are permanent. Starting a company is like baking a cake. If you leave out the sugar, you can't add it in later. A company that races for short-term advantage by sacrificing self-respect or any other principle will never regain it. So the way you behave for your first product is the way you'll behave forever. Imagine an executive who listens to programmers, engineers, and architects, who is not afraid of programmers, who is not ignorant of software issues, who recognizes that whatever business the company is in the information age, is in the software business, who recognizes how difficult it is to manage software, and understands how vital the need is for an effective management infrastructure, and who knows that the trick isn't in managing technology, but it's in managing the technology workers, who recognizes the personality differences between business people and programmers, that business people are external and humanistic and very competitive, and that programmers are internal and logical and very competitive, who recognizes that software construction is a scary business, yet does not take counsel of his or her fears. Imagine a marketing person who knows that product marketing and product design are two very different disciplines, who understands market segments are rarely the same as user segments, who understands that market research is not product architecture research. Imagine a salesperson who recognizes complaining customers need to be helped, but that this does not qualify them to be software architects. Imagine a work environment founded on mutual trust that has been earned over time, where the programmers trust the executives, where the executives trust the programmers, where the programmers trust the architects, because the programmers know from experience that the architects make their job easier and their products better. Imagine an IT department whose success is measured in terms of employee loyalty. That's a big one. Imagine a customer base that hasn't learned to expect mistreatment, that is accessible and not hidden behind jealous managers with hidden agendas, that is so confident that you are not guessing that they do not feel the need to help you design your product. Imagine a return to craftsmanship where it is recognized that software construction is a craft, and craft is noble. That in pre-industrial times, craft was revered, that the industrial age devalued craft, and that the industrial age is over. And in the information age, craft is once again ascendant. And software is the most demanding of all craft. Creating software is neither art, nor science, nor labor, nor management. It's not white collar, it's not blue collar. Software creation is a hands-on activity. It is collaborative and cannot be delegated the way manufacturing can. And one of my favorite quotes, which I'm going to paraphrase from Mark Twain, "Your true programmer cares nothing about anything on earth but the code, and his pride in his occupation surpasses the pride of kings." Imagine a manager who recognizes the role of craft, who encourages his craftsmen to perform their craft to the height of their ability, who has the journeyman train the apprentices, who has the master craftsman set the standards, who measures her craftsman's abilities in practical terms, not in academic terms, and who guards against any craft becoming subservient to any other, who knows that craftspeople can become lost in their craft and need a supervisor to keep them aimed. So, who establishes the role of programming supervisor to make sure their aim is true. Imagine this new role of programming supervisor, who facilitates the deep and constant collaboration between architects, engineers, and programmers. One who is a former programmer and whose job it is to assure that the programmers stay focused and on task, who the programmers can talk candidly with when they have a problem or foresee difficult issues, and who assures that the programmers have the resources they need when they need them, and who understands that separating user interface from software construction dooms both. Imagine a code base that is never valued more highly than the people who built it, that is as disposable as a desk lamp or a computer, that is stable because it was built correctly from the beginning, and that is retired with respect when it has outlived its usefulness. Imagine an architectural design process that is rational, rigorous, defensible, understandable, and effective, that serves the user's goals instead of obeying the user's pathology, that uncovers real answers instead of parroting truth by repeated assertion, that synthesizes solutions from the confluence of people, purpose, and technology. The role of architecture is in the center of these three things, and recognizes that none of these considerations can be omitted or allowed to dominate any other. That technology and people without purpose is art, that purpose and people without technology is psychology, and that purpose and technology without people is engineering. An architectural design process that determines the form and behavior of software before construction begins, that enlightens the design process with real insight, that does not rely on opinions, personal preferences, or artistic talent, that has powerful empirical tools for determining the behavior, goals, and needs of users, that is rigorous in documenting and communicating with everyone involved in the software construction process, and that recognizes the large and growing body of scientific evidence that proves users are utterly incapable of sensing or expressing their own behavior, goals, or needs, or even of evaluating the fitness of any proposed solution. Now imagine an architecture phase where the architect is responsible for designing every aspect of the system that comes in contact with human users, where the architect is given time to explore ideas, where senior executives understand that the architect's work is more important than finance, marketing, and operations put together, where the engineers work closely with the architects, building small proof-of-concept projects to test hypotheses, where the finished architectural solution is clearly communicated to all stakeholders with detailed, written form and behavior specifications. Now imagine a product whose behavior makes users actually want to buy and use that product, even willing to spend their own money on it. A product that pleases users, that makes users giggle with pleasure, that lets users' productivity soar, that never makes users feel stupid, that lets the user easily achieve the goals of the business, that reduces software training costs to insignificant, that reduces employee turnover to insignificant, that makes the product's most powerful and effective marketing tool its fanatically loyal users. The only unexpected thing that it does is exceed your expectations. Now imagine that software architect, a person who loves the human side of software products, who is a non-coding programmer, who has ultimate decision authority over everything in the product that comes in contact with the user, who knows how to do field research, gathering valuable intelligence and insight into how users do their jobs and what motivates them, who knows what matters with programming, even if she isn't a programmer, who is sincerely interested in what the programmers do, who works closely with the programmers and the engineers during the architecture phase to assure that design decisions are technically correct and appropriate, who never asks programmers to do anything impractical or technically infeasible, whose professional title is architect and not user interface designer or programmer or interaction designer or human factors professional or usability professional or product manager or any one of 1,000 other titles. Now imagine a usability professional whose contributions are actively sought by programmers because they help, whose work is no longer ignored because it now fits into a larger architectural plan, and whose empirical tests are tightly focused, practical, and mostly performed during the architectural phase, before programming begins, when they can make a real difference. Imagine an engineering phase during which no release code is written, that occurs concurrently with the architecture phase, during which engineering takes place, but not programming, during which the engineers solve technical problems absent any production pressure. Imagine a prototype that gets thrown away. Yes, you know from hard experience. Imagine an engineer who focuses exclusively on technology, evaluating it, discovering it, integrating it, who has ultimate decision authority over all technical issues, who gets to spend all of her time solving those difficult technical problems, and who is given the time and resources she needs to solve those problems, who is not forced to write production code or design user interfaces, whose professional title is engineer and not architect or programmer or any one of 1,000 other titles. Now imagine a programming phase during which the programmers have instant access to consulting architects and engineers to solve unexpected new problems as they occur, which, as you all know, they do about every 10 minutes. When the programmer is given enough time to write the best code she is capable of, that only begins when all interaction design is completed, that only begins when all product conceptualizing is completed, that only begins when all technical engineering problems have been addressed. Now imagine a product manager who isn't afraid of programmers, who doesn't guess, who understands that keeping programmers in a constant state of agitation about the schedule is counterproductive, who doesn't attempt to tell the programmers what to do, who understands that his role is not to be the overseer's whip hand, whose personal success is tied to the long-term success of the product and not to a deadline, who recognizes that the weakest management tools are deadlines and feature lists, who recognizes that the way Microsoft builds software isn't the only way to build software, who recognizes that doing things the same way the competition does them makes it harder to compete with them, who recognizes that reacting to the competition is an abdication of market leadership. Now imagine a programmer who finds her daily work to be ethically clean and morally satisfying, and who really believes that the program she is writing will delight users, who knows that he or she can be honest with managers, who is sincerely asked for honest estimates, and who is given sufficient time to verify those estimates, who isn't frustrated at her job, who isn't cynical and fatalistic about management, who doesn't have to tolerate boneheaded decisions made by people whose primary rationale is fear, who doesn't have to resort to passive-aggressive tactics to avoid disasters, who is proud to be a highly skilled, highly paid, highly respected craftsperson, whose professional title is programmer, not engineer, not architect, not any one of 1,000 other titles. I am committed to bringing this vision into reality. It's about people, and it's not about technology. That's, right now, the industry has suffered a grievous wound as its little boil of the dot-com world has popped. And now is a tremendous time. It's an inflection point in the industry, and a time for growth and a time for opportunity. Most of the old players are hunkered down, cowering in fear. Now is a great time in this industry. It's time to be introspective, something that rarely happens in the computer industry. I've been in it for many, many years. And I have to say that I'm really encouraged by the first inklings of professional introspection in the programming community that I see. And I also see introspection in the engineering community. In the engineering community, I see it with an emphasis on the rational process, which is about, isn't there some way to organize what we do so it's not quite so chaotic? And then, of course, in the programming side, there's the irrational process, often referred to as agile methods or extreme programming. And I really think that the extreme programming people are doing fabulous work. They're really focusing the programming community on themselves and on their social and personal interactions with each other and with the people that they serve. And this is a fantastic move. I mean, I think their practices are very helpful also. But the significant thing about what they're doing that's unique is this idea that it's about people and it's not about technology and it's not about programming languages and it's not about coding techniques. One of the things that they've done is they've created this manifesto for agile software development. How many of you have seen this? And so you can find it on the web. And it says, "We are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. That is, while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more." What a remarkably, refreshingly, personally written statement this is, signed by individuals, and it says, well, while there's value in those other items that we don't like, there's value here. It's a very impressive document, and I agree with everything that it says. I think that this business about responding to change over following to plan, I just don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. I think that, yes, you have to respond to change, but if you begin your response, your responding phase after a detailed planning phase, you'll be much better off. You'll have to do less reaction. And I don't think that's because of any conflict in our philosophies. I think it's because the Agile guys, like pretty much every programmer in the world, has never really been exposed to what I would call real architectural planning, because there's so little of it being done in the industry. And what little is being done is generally being dismembered before it gets into the hands of the actual programmers. Well, inspired by this, I created my own manifesto for goal-directed software construction. And it looks a little like this. We are uncovering better ways of serving the highest needs of the real end user by having talented, skilled architects determine how software can best serve the user in collaboration with talented, skilled programmers who determine how the software can best be built. The synergy between these two pragmatic crafts brings value. Architects and programmers over engineers and coders. Doing the right thing over doing the thing right. Serving the user's goals over obeying the user's pathology. Responding to real needs over creeping featureism. And collaboration between professionals over turf battles. That is, while there's value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. So that's my vision. What's yours? I was hoping that some of you might have some comments.
After this presentation, I can only say amen.
Thank you.
Sounds almost like you are trying to start up the programmers party. Like you have a manifesto and all of this presentation. I think it's quite it's great what you said here, but and I feel touched a few times when you mentioned the intelligent architect and stuff like that. I'm doing something like that sometimes. But how realistic do you think is that?
How
realistic?
How realistic?
You see, all of these manifestos, if you look from Marx to the current times, they're nice stories and everything, but when it came to reality.
Yeah. Well, Marx had a truly brilliant philosopher had one tiny flaw, which is his concept didn't work. And the remarkable thing about this concept is I think there's abundant proof that it works. And if you look at all of the philosophers of business today, this is the pitch that they give. They all say, you have to do this. The problem is not that this is the wrong thing. The problem is that we don't know how. And so, but I think it's very realistic because I think that knowing what to do and being motivated to do it, that's the hard part. And so this is why I think it's a good thing that the technology industry is hurting. Because, I mean, if you've been in the industry as long as I have, you've seen that it starts out with 1,000 points of light. And over a few years, it coalesces into like 3 giant headlights, and then they go dim. And then 1,000 points of light. This is a political speech, isn't it? And then they coalesce into 3 giant headlights, and then they go dim, and then 1,000 points of light. Well, I think we're at one of those inflection points where people have been talking about the coming of the information age for a long time, and people keep drawing those hockey sticks. And And the problem is that we are, in fact, standing on the threshold of the information age with our tool bags of well-sharpened, well-honed, well-practiced industrial age tools. And we, as the craftspeople of the programming community, are kind of down in the trenches, you know, building this stuff, and the really bad decisions are being made above our heads. It's a management issue. The people with the old tools aren't the programmers. I mean, programmers, we have old tools, but they're not tremendously consequential. The tools that are old and beat up are the management tools. And it's time for an executive to come along and say, there is value to be had in doing things a different way, conscientiously rather than accidentally. Thank you. Sandy, do you have somebody with a mic? Chuck.
I guess I haven't had enough to say yet today.
Be nice now.
Is the mic? Yeah, there we go.
It's a technical.
You had us start out by imagining a lot of scenarios and so on that, like an investor who has some level of understanding that's beyond where investors seem to be today. So, and other scenarios that just aren't available to us right now that I would love to imagine in some future. So my question is, you know that I'm the VP of Marketing at Rockcliffe, and you know what Rockcliffe kind of does and so on. Can you give me 3 things that I should go into the office tomorrow morning and think about doing different than what I did this morning when I walked in?
Put on your left sock first. That's a good question. I don't know if I can answer that, but I want to think about that. I mean, as you can see, at the place where I am, I'm very much in the envision phase. This is where I was in 1975 when I saw these computers. There were computers this big, and you could buy them for $500. And I said, oh my goodness, that's going to change the universe. People said, why would I want a computer? I said, I don't know, but you're going to want one. And I dove in with that philosophy in mind. And 15 years ago, I said that people are going to want to program things visually. You're going to want to drag stuff around on the screen instead of coding. And that was, I didn't really know what that would look like, but I knew that was an appropriate vision. And 10 years ago, I said, it's time to start figuring out how it is that you can systematically, repeatably, trainably, dependably design, architect software that people, in fact, are delighted by. And it was just a vision. And I waded into it. And lo and behold, when I saw that as my quest, I found the answers. It took a while, but I found those answers. And so I have been finding, as an interaction design consultant, 10 years ago when I started, the most resistance I got was from the programming community. They basically thought that we were coming in to take the 2% of inspiration away from the programmers and leave them with being coders. And until they worked with us and discovered that we were doing the stuff that they were sweeping under the rug because they didn't like it. And we loved it, you know. And so the programming community discovered that this was actually a pretty symbiotic relationship. But it's the management who has remained really hard-headed. And the main reason why they're hard-headed about this, I'm convinced, is because there are 2 kinds of managers out there. There are those managers who are programmers and those managers who are terrified of programmers. And if you ask managers, give them a couple of beers and then ask them, and they'll admit their fears. And this is what they do. So you have to say to yourself, what am I doing because it's the way it's done, as opposed to because there's a real reason for this that I've proven to myself, other than just other people do it this way. And what is it I'm doing out of fear? Because I think we have to conquer our fears. So that's what you should do tomorrow morning. Go in and say, what am I afraid of? I'm filled with terrible fears. So you probably are too. And you probably, like me, have a hard time admitting them. Back there. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to find too much disagreement from many people in this room about what you've said here. I think we're, at least, if I can speak for everybody, I don't know if I can, but I certainly agree with what you said. As the first gentleman said, I think it's a wonderful approach. I don't particularly think that I operate out of fear on a daily basis with regard to software development. It happens, but with regard to the management issue, I mean, how do you plan on taking this manifesto to my management? I would love to work from within, and I bang my head against that wall daily. There are a lot of coworkers that I have who attempt to get together. We have a skunk works where I work, but it's a big wall, and it's not that the management doesn't care. I just don't know that they should care.
Right. Right. I think that was well said. I think that they're pretty clueless. I think they still think that they're in a world of manufacturing and atoms. I mean, it's a very simple equation, okay? If you're in business, what you have to do is you have to make a sustained profit. There's two ways that you can do that. One is you can seek out new sources of revenue and you can raise your prices, okay? Raising your prices runs into the elasticity of the laws of supply and demand. But that's the area where the really adventurous and creative people go. Okay, that's about 3% of the business community. And the 97% of the rest of the business community, and these are brilliant business people, where they go is in driving costs down. It's certain, it's dependable, it's defensible to the board of directors, and people don't get fired for driving the cost down. The problem is that the place where you drive costs down in an industrial age company is in the variable cost, not in the fixed cost. The fixed cost is all about making an investment for a long-term payback. And the only place where you can make significant returns by cost reduction is in variable cost. In software, there's no variable cost. My assertion is that the whole economic game is completely and utterly turned upside down and inside out. And those guys who are running companies with MBAs today learned at the hands of old dinosaurs, Those rules aren't applicable anymore. And yet what they still do is they still want to drive the costs down. I think the number one thing that you can do to them, I've stopped going to people and saying, let's make our users happy. Because managers kind of go, why would I want to do that? I've sort of realized, okay, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, but it's not what gets this guy out of bed in the morning. But instead I go to him and say, on what planet might you think that building a product without knowing what your product is before you build it is going to be better? It's a very simple business proposition. Okay, thank you. This is point number 2. And in fact, I said it in here. I do not believe that you can change the personality, the culture of your company. That once you have established your company, its culture is there. Well, it's like you're given the virus, and then from then on, the virus has its way with you as it eats away. So the thing is the answer to your question about how am I going to get this message across, there's only one way that I can possibly get it across, and that's by example. Yes, and I'm going to not create a company in the model of all the other companies that we've been creating and that I've created and that there are thousands of in Silicon Valley. And I want to do something completely different, and I want to do it based on this. I'm an old fart. I'm tired of chasing after somebody else's dream, and I've decided that what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather around me people who are driven by this vision of creating great software, having the time to do it, and not working contentiously, but working together. And you know what's really interesting? What's really, really fascinating to me, and something I didn't expect at all? I did expect that when I broached this idea to Sand Hill Road investment community, that they would all say, wow, what a great idea. And the next move is, okay. But the thing that has really astonished me is how many programmers, really accomplished individuals, have said to me things like, wow, I'd like to work on that. I go, well, I don't have any money. They go, I don't need money. I think, I mean, it was those offers, and there was not just one. There were many offers like that, that got me to realize that this is a movement, that there's this great dissatisfaction. I mean, this is what I love about programmers, is they care. They care more than anybody. You know, there are a lot of people who are talking about user experience, you know, and they're probably better at giving a user experience than the programmers are, but they don't care that much because they won't put their livelihood on the table. And programmers will, because programmers will play that game for serious. If you have a skunkworks, that's the place to do it. And if the skunkworks is operating under rules from headquarters, then it's not a skunkworks. Okay, so change the name. Don't insult skunkworks. Next question. Yes, sir.
Please keep it with people who have the microphone.
Oh, okay, who's got a microphone then?
I don't carry one on me usually.
No, hang on. You wait, we'll get a microphone to you.
Oh, okay.
No, you got a question? Please, you wait, we'll get back to you with a microphone. Please go.
My question is this, is in the last 30 or 40 years, there's been tremendous change in the cooperation companies, the way they've been organized. In the 50s and 60s, we used to work and go to work for one or two companies and retire. Now there seems that paradigm is lost. So there is this fear, part of this fear you're talking about is this total job insecurity because of this situation. And I was with a company called Ariba where they made a big deal. We don't count, loyalty does not count. I mean, that was on the bulletin, that was on the PowerPoint, for instance. Probably one of the reasons why it bombed. What my suggestion, my point is that why are bright, smart, intelligent people going to be productive and creative in these kinds of environments? Now, I'd like to make one suggestion as you put together this company. Maybe there's a way that a company can give 3 to 5 year types of contract, not the things that we do in universities where they get their tenure and then they spend 20 years turning off students, you know, because they forget about what teaching's all about. But maybe there's short-term types of ways that we can create a sense of creativity with short-term contract, with some type of contract situations, so that I, as a creative, innovative person, know on Monday that I do have a job, that I can think creatively, that somebody isn't counting the beans every day. So I think what I'm saying is there has to be a lot of work that goes into how you actually sit down and organize these things, because as this gentleman says there, Marxism, of course, has killed 70 million people in the last 100 years based upon being a true believer. So anyway, that's.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, those are really good points. I would pass the mic to this guy, okay? I actually would come at it from a different point of view, which is, I believe, and I'm, you know, an old-fashioned guy, I believe that what holds business relationships together is not the contractual glue, but it's the structural strength of the dovetailing, of the mutual advantage that the parties get. And the problem is that I don't see a lot of mutual advantage. And anybody who's ever had somebody work for them before, somebody comes up to them and says, I'd like a raise, and you give them a raise, and then 6 months later, they're dissatisfied about their salary again. On the other hand, when I mentioned the idea of working on a product that might delight people, people were saying, well, I'll work for free. People are not motivated by money. Now, this is one of the things that is a term of art in the management industry is called a hygienic factor, in that you show up you don't show up at the office every morning because there's electricity there. On the other hand, if there were no electricity, you wouldn't show up. It's a hygienic factor. It has the power to dissuade, but not to persuade. And actually, salary is the same way. And what we've done in Silicon Valley is we have been bowing to Bill Gates. I was going to title this talk, "We Are All Bill's Children." We've been bowing to Bill Gates and the venture community and the people who I like to refer to as the 99ers, the gold rush people who came here 3 years ago and ruined everything for us. And maybe we could name a football team after them. So the thing is that I think what they did was they brought a lot of bad values. When I started, in the software industry, I was a sort of unreconstructed hippie, and I was kind of going. I was like Steve Wozniak. Whoa, this stuff is really cool. Maybe I could make some money too while I tinker with the neat stuff. And I think that's the source of all great things in the universe. Actually, I mean, totally. That's my point of view, and you have to take that with a grain of salt. But that's how I look at it. So, I think there's a lot of focus on people going after money, and the way. If everybody's grubbing after money, the way you hold things together is with contracts. And in my experience, if you truly make a great place for great people to come and do great things every day, you have them sleeping less and eating at the office because they love it. Now, for a short time, we had the appearance of that in Silicon Valley during the dot-com bubble. But that wasn't real. That was just greed, and it was panic, and it was fear. Fear that you were going to be left out of the bubble. But the real motivation is really there. And then you don't need contracts. And then people have job security. And the reason why they have job security, one of the reasons why we don't have job security today is because if you have a good job at Microsoft, the day there's an alternative to the software that Microsoft sells me, I'll buy it. And Microsoft stock goes, and all those people who are working up there go, their jobs go. Okay? So they don't have job security. You see? What makes real job security is when people love your product and they love your company and you love to work there. And I understand that this is a wild fantasy, but what the hell? What else are you doing? Did you get a mic?
I have a mic.
Speak. And then you're next.
I really focused on your word craftsmanship and craftsman.
Good.
Because I think that's a lot of the confusion of management and corporations is understanding people as craftsmen. But what I would ask in your thinking is craftsmen were organized and they worked in certain types of organizations and they weren't large industrial organizations. They weren't ones run by lots of accountants. They were oftentimes a craftsman who built up a grub stake who then went and started his own business with some other craftsman who wanted to be apprenticed. And maybe one of the key things to bring in here is a different business structure that we should expect, that programmers and architects should expect to be in rather than hooking into that big corporation, that we're going to need to build up our own grub stakes and create our own craftsman shops in order to have this kind of environment, in order to prove the point the first time.
Yes. Yes. See, this is what is so exciting to me, is because in 1975, I looked around and said, whoa, I can build a business for no money. Just me, out of a spare bedroom. You couldn't do that before. You know, you needed some money, you needed some capital. I started my first business with $11,000 I borrowed from my dad. I put 4,000 of it in a bank account, used 7 of it, and said, okay, the 4,000 will pay back the principal. Let's see, I got about 2.5 years to make something of myself, and then after that I have to get a real job. And I mean, that's well, thank you, America. That's what you can do here. I think we're at that point again. And I think that if you look at the great software products in the world today, they've only been created by 8 or 10 people. And I think if you look at the great, huge abominations of the world, they're the ones slaved over by hundreds of people. And I think there's some real opportunity to do it again. I think that what happened 10, 15 years ago, the business of selling shrink-wrapped software, which was a viable business, began to coalesce, began to shake out. And I learned, in the late 80s, I learned a new word, monopsony. It's the opposite of monopoly. It's when there's only one person buying. And it means that as an independent software inventor, you take it to the one person who dominates software publishing, and you say, would you like to buy it? And he says, yeah, and here's what I'll give you for it. And you say, no, I want more. He says, I'll wait. Okay. So that avenue closed. I mean, you could still do it if you loved it, but there was not a real business opportunity there. But what I don't think that a lot of the big players in the industry have realized is the web, despite all of the webness, is the great democratizer. And it's back again. It's just like 1975. You can sit down and you can write a great piece of software, and you can ship it, and you can sell it over the web, and you can build yourself a company for no money at all. You don't need a sales force. You don't need a shipping force. You don't need a factory. You don't need any infrastructure. You and a couple of buddies can do it in your garage. One of the reasons why a lot of that hasn't happened so far is because people have had this really goofy idea driven into their head that you can deliver good quality software inside a browser, which is completely incorrect. Okay, but when people realize that the web is not a thing about browsers, as I like to say, browsers are like elevators. You know, everybody uses them to get to their office, but nobody actually opens their briefcase and starts working in them. There's a company called, no, God help us. There's a company called At Last Software, @LAST, of course. And they make a product called SketchUp. If you are an architect, you will go home, you will go to the sketchup.com website, you will spend 10 minutes looking at it, you will write them a check, you will buy it. What these guys have done is, I mean, there's lots of CAD software out there that lets architects draw working drawings of houses and stuff. But what these guys have done is this truly remarkable piece of software that's a sketching and visualization product for architects and builders. And what you can do is you can draw a rectangle, extrude it into a cube, draw a line across the top that's a peak for the eaves, grab it and pull it up and build a gable. And then you can draw a couple of lines and make it a hipped gable. And then you can stretch it out and you can spin it around, rotate it in 3D real time. You can add surfaces to it and just expand it. And you can do walkthroughs going crazy. It's an architect's fantasy dream product. And it is a wonderfully usable product. It takes about 7 or 8 controls to do pretty much everything it has. You want to see what the sunshine looks like in January at 12 noon, you dial January 12 noon, and the sun goes up, and there's your shadows. You can see where the windows, where the sun goes. It's just, there's not an architect in the world who isn't going to buy this thing. It's truly wonderful. They want $500 for it. There's 30 people in the company. You go to the website, and you push a button, and it downloads the product, and you get it for 12 days, free, and then it stops. I found out that if you don't ever shut the program down, it will go longer. The way I found that out is because I never left my computer for like 17 days. I was so spellbound by this magnificent piece of software. I think these guys are an archetype for what can be done. A few guys with a brilliant idea and a drive to create great and wonderful things. And I get a monthly newsletter from them, and it's just giddy. These guys are having so much fun. They're writing a great product. As any of you have ever heard me talk, I hate software. I hate it all. I think it all sucks, except SketchUp. They're inspiring to me. Yeah, and I would happily give it to them. I've been telling them. But last weekend, I was at 2 social functions and ran into 2 architects, and I like grabbed them and dragged them off and showed them the website. I was so excited. I got to pitch them on SketchUp. Yes, sir.
You made the point about craftsmanship, which I agree with very much. And years ago, programming really was a craftsman discipline. Over the years, though, we've really institutionalized it, and we've created computer science departments and methodologies and such. You spoke about craftsmanship, though, from the point of view of companies hiring programmers, architects, engineers. What are your thoughts on the training of them? Is this something that should be the university responsibility, and if so, how should those disciplines be changed, or should industry take a responsibility, much like unions are responsible in part for training various crafts?
Boy, that's a good question. I'm not sure I know the answer. I'll tell you one thing that I do know is that I don't know of any craftspeople trained in their craft at university. Do you? Universities, is what I know, don't teach craft. It's beneath them. It's MIT. They teach the craft of
engineering, of thought, problem solving. That's great.
All right.
I didn't learn everything I learned there.
I think that craft is traditionally is taught by craftsmen. There's a wonderful book out by Pete McBreen called Software Craftsmanship, and it's a what's the word? It's like this. It's a vision of a world of software craftsmanship. I recommend it. I had a chance to meet Pete McBreen about a month ago and talk with him, and he's a very interesting fellow, and I think that he is another example of this new movement within the programming community of being introspective and understanding that the problems are about people and not about languages and technology, and it's a recognition that, okay, we've kind of achieved, a certain level of technical expertise. Why do the results suck so badly? And I think, and also, I think there are, programmers of an age who are kind of getting tired of it, and they want to build something good, and they know that they're not being given good mandates. I talked to a guy the other day, a guy I like. He's a personal friend of mine. He's very interested in voice recognition stuff, and what he's going to do is he's going to make a thing so that people tradesmen who go around, his example was roof inspectors. And what they do is they go and inspect roofs, and then they get in their car and they type or write down the results of their inspection. Then they drive to the next site and they inspect another roof. And he says what they're going to do is they're going to have their little cell phone and they're going to talk to a voice response system. They're going to go, yeah, there were some shingles on the northeast corner that needed to be replaced. Yes. Next. And kind of going through voice hierarchical menus using voice recognition. And I'm going, yes, and there are people who take jobs pumping out, cesspools, but this is not a job that one would choose, and this is a job where you're gonna have a lot of turnover. I can't think of anything more frustrating and obnoxious than spending all day long working with a voice response system over your cell phone. It would be so much more preferable to just work on paper, even though paper is very inefficient. And I can totally understand how the company that employs this guy is going to want this program, and is going to buy this program, and is going to give this program to their employee. Right. Well, because on paper, it looks like a good idea. See, the thing is this is why I think the dot-coms died, is because everybody talked about the new economy. But what the dot-coms really were is the last gasp of the old economy. Pets.com was based on the premise that they can build a successful business by lowering their cost of delivering atoms to you. Okay? What's in it for me and my dog? You see, I don't see how this is a new economy thing. And what happened is it turns out that in fact they didn't deliver a benefit and it didn't fly. You know, I met Julie Wainwright the other day for the first time, the founder of Pets.com, and I asked her, I said, do people want to buy pet food over the internet? And she said, we sold $48 million a quarter worth of dog food. That's a non-answer. It's not focusing on the issues. I don't care how much dog food you can move. What I want to know is, do people want to buy it? And why would they want to buy it? You see? That's the question that you have to ask. You're next. Yes, sir.
Hi there.
Just whack it against the furniture a couple times.
Right. There we go. Like everyone else, I really liked your presentation. I started thinking, well, hold on.
But it really sucks.
Somehow I suspect you don't mind controversy, and you haven't been getting any. The danger of really good rhetoric is it gets in the way of actually hearing what you're saying. And so I found myself trying to think about what you were saying.
I take that as a compliment then, about the good rhetoric thing.
Yeah.
I take it where I can get it. You know? Okay, go ahead.
So I was trying to figure out, well, what are the core issues here? And I mean, questions like, okay, what do I do with that tomorrow? And going in, and the fact that you actually had trouble answering that question, I found particularly interesting. But the beginnings of good ideas take a while to turn into practical, so that's fine. So I figured one of the things that you were saying was that programming would be better if it was all women.
Everything would be better if it was all women.
Well, and
you know that old joke, if they can put a man on the moon, why can't they put them all?
All the problems with product management were men.
All
the problems with product management were men. Your use of genders was really pretty consistent.
Was that true? I'm so transparent. Okay.
But then it occurred to me that there was a chance that what you're, and I should say, you've been adding a lot of comments which I think actually go against some of what you were implying through the rhetoric of your presentation style. Because the rhetoric of your presentation style was all unidirectional rather than balance. In fact, while you later clarified the sense of one thing over another, the pattern of your presentation was time deadlines are bad, and you've in fact stressed that more directly. In point of fact, my experience is when you don't have time deadlines, you never get done.
Right. Yes, that's been my experience also. And in fact, I'm not advocating that we get rid of deadlines. What I'm advocating is that we get rid of deadlines as our sole management tool. And one of the themes that I was trying to communicate in my talk, clearly I failed, was that what we need is something to replace those inadequate management tools of deadline and feature list. And in fact, I think that one of the key management tools that has been well known for eons has been a plan. When you know what it is you're doing and you've been able to think the plan through, then executing, following the plan happens much more efficiently, much more cleanly. You have the ability to measure your performance against the plan. You have the ability to see how you're doing. You learn for next time. It means you know when you're done. One of the things about not having a plan is and calling it development, is it kind of goes on forever. One of the number one reasons, I talk about this in my book, one of the number one reasons why managers who are terrified of programmers, whether they admit it or not, set draconian deadlines is because they live in a deep and primal fear of the software that never ships. And they would rather ship crap than ship something, never ship something. And the thing is that if you were to go to any single manager in any single business who isn't a complete idiot and say, would you rather be a month late or ship a failure? They will happily choose the late. The problem is that they have constructed for themselves a world that it's just a black box. They have no idea what goes on in there. And what they've done is they've polarized, and we have contributed to the polarization. And so there's no communication. And I really, really think that management can communicate with programmers. However, I think that in order to do that, I do not think that the lion is going to lay down with the lamb. I do not think that the manager is going to lay down with the programmer, and not necessarily in that order. What I do think is there's going to be go-betweens. And I think there are going to be two significant go-betweens. Number one is the architect, because the architect is the user advocate and who is the person who creates the plan. That's what architects do. They plan. And they create that synthesis of people and technology and purpose. And the other one is the supervisor. The thing about craft is craftspeople don't need to be told how to do their craft, but they need to be guided in fitting their craft into the larger process of construction. Every single craft has some level, job level supervisor. It's like a non-commissioned officer in the military. It's a person who acts as the buffer between the officers who decide what to do and the enlisted people who do it. And this person, this non-commissioned officer, always comes up through the ranks, always has been there, been in the trenches. And I believe that this person is missing in our world of craft. So that what happens is programmers who become good enough to guide programming either go off and become frustrated, dreamy lecturers, who say, gosh, work on a project that's nice, or what they do is they put on a suit and go over to the dark side. And I believe, no, not marketing. Marketing is wonderful. No, I'm talking about managers who rule by fear, who are ruled by fear. I just want to say that while I had trouble telling Chuck what to do tomorrow morning, I have no trouble knowing what I'm going to do tomorrow morning. And I'm telling you that the answer to this question of what do I do tomorrow morning is going to come from one place. And it's right there. There. Because you have to look inside your own head to figure out what you want. And you have to say, am I scared of losing my paycheck? Or am I scared of building a world that I'm embarrassed to bequeath to my children? Okay, now it just so happens that we've all got no paychecks anyway. So what a wonderful time! Yes, sir.
It seems of what you described, some of the attributes of programmers who do it because they love to do it and doing the right thing and serving user goals are very much part of the open source effort and the Linux organization. And plus they have the socially worthwhile goal of fighting for world freedom from the dark side and evils up there in Redmond.
Right.
Is that maybe the future of software development? Is open source where people can contribute and get involved in really what they enjoy doing?
Well, as I like to say about open source, yes, Mr. Businessman, put 500,000 libertarian anarchist programmers on your critical path.
IBM's got $1 billion in it.
Having said that, I have a couple of things to say. Number one, I think open source is great. I think it's a great, great thing. I think that it is great for building tools. I think if you look at craftspeople, if you read the work of Henry Petrosky, this is what craftspeople do, is over the generations, they refine their tools, and they do it collaboratively, and they do it experimentally. And it's great, and it's a great process. And that's exactly what's going on. If you listen to Linus Torvalds rant and rave about evolution, and how Linux isn't planned, it's evolved, with the minor exception of the fact that he's copying an operating system that's been in existence for 30 years. That minor little footnote. It's unplanned. So what I'm saying is, I think that open source is a great process for tool development. I don't think it's an appropriate process for building commercial software. I think that if it weren't for the fact that there's a tremendous weight of desire for what I call the anything but Bill club, Linux would not be anything beyond a laboratory curiosity. I mean, it would be, well, yeah, it wouldn't be anything beyond a laboratory curiosity. I mean, I think laboratory curiosities are great, and they contribute a lot to our world and to our society. And I think that, I can't think of anything, better than a programmer who cut his or her teeth on Linux or, or BSD Unix or something. No, I don't think it's the future. I think it's the sort of the basketball team in the prison yard.
Say some more.
Was that too harsh? I mean, it's not going to set us free, but that doesn't mean it's not a great thing. So, who's got the next mic? Frank.
So, let me give you a little bit of hell over that last answer then. So, I'm trying to understand how this new business of yours is going to be formed. Because on the one hand, I see in your slides that there seems to be plenty of kind of well-tinged venom to the kind of traditional capitalist businesses that exist, and the businesses processes that they have to follow to prove that they've been capitalized correctly. And yet you trash open source, right?
Trash. I mildly criticized.
No, I'd say that was a trash. And in my own opinion, I'd say that considering that the world's web servers are running on an open source product, to the vast majority, and nobody owns that product, that's a pretty interesting way of capitalizing a business. So I'm wondering, can you bridge the gap for us? These engineers that you've got who might work for you for free, someday would probably say, hey, 2/3 of the world's web servers are running our software, and that's going to create great worth. What's my part of it? How are you going to bridge the gap between putting out a product that's based on the efforts of people who are willing to volunteer their time versus what it seems to be you're espousing is a very capitalist type of business?
Right. I don't for a minute expect to have programmers work for me for free. I am humbled and impressed that programmers would offer their services. And that has inspired me. And one of the things that has inspired me to do is to figure out a way to pay them. Okay? I think that programmers program, writers write. Birds gotta fly and fish gotta swim. I mean, this is what we do. And so programmers program, and programmers are being given crap assignments in their paying jobs. And so this is why they create things like open source. And a lot of very self-interested organizations have seen an opportunity to use, the fruit of a hardworking, conscientious moonlighter. I mean, I like to build model railroads in my garage, And unfortunately, there is no commercial potential for that. But that's what open source is. Now, I've seen model railroads that are works of art, that are fantastic achievements, that are amazing things. And I think that Linux is that. And it does have a practical application. But I don't believe that our future can be built on a foundation of people's frustration in their day-to-day job that they take out in their fantastic hobbies. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying stop building model railroads, or that model railroads are wrong, or that open source is wrong. I'm saying from a business point of view, you can't let that drive your business. That's all. And I think that what companies like IBM are doing is very dicey. I think if my vision came to pass, IBM's, or let's say, the people who are running their software on Linux servers are going to be in a world of hurt. Who did that? How about that license number? Who's got the mic? Yes, sir.
I enjoyed your previous book very much, and I'm looking forward to the new version of About Face. But I was wondering, I'm sure you probably address it in the new version, but maybe you could give us a preview now. I agree that a browser is a terrible way to interact with software, but my problem as a programmer is doing enterprise applications is what do I do about it? Since most all business applications now are either through a browser or being rewritten to go through a browser.
Yes. Rewrite them so they don't go through a browser.
How do you solve the deployment problem that businesses...
Well, what does the browser deliver to you? What? 4. Look, software is software. Okay? The browser is not made out of concrete. It's just code. Anything that you can do in software, you can deploy anywhere. You want to control the deployment of software, then get control of the deployment of software. There are tools available to do it. There's technologies available to do it. The problem is there's this easy path. It's once again, it's the old economy. It's industrial age thinking, which is it's cheaper for me to ship my product using a browser. Therefore, I'm going to do it. And so there's this industry-wide imperative to put everything inside of a browser. But one of the reasons why I'm excited about .NET is because it's a runtime. What is a browser? A browser is a runtime. Okay? .NET is a runtime that allows you to not necessarily have to work in that batch process way that was thrown out by IBM 30 years ago as being bad. Okay? And that does something like, okay, so you've got 100 million PCs operating at a gigahertz. Okay? And what you do is you put all the processing on 100,000 servers. And then you pipe all of the information through pipes. Probably 90% or more of the data that goes back and forth through our precious bandwidth is redundant, useless information. And in the meantime, while you're sitting here right now, all of your CPUs in your home and in your office are sitting there going no op, no op, no op 1 billion times a second. And it's a terrible waste. And programmers have completely bought into this thing about shipping stuff on the browser. And I see no justification for it whatsoever. All it is it's abusive of humans. It's a lousy software. Now, there's a role for the browser. There's a role for elevators. Okay? But why can't we deploy decent software that really interacts with people and that uses some of those cycles and uses some of that RAM and uses some of those 60 gigabyte drives that you can buy for $85, you know, instead of having it all done on the server. I mean, it's just bad architecture. It's bad software. It's bad. And the thing is in the craziness of 1999, for me to say something like that, I was kind of like laughed at. I'm still laughed at, but more quietly. And but the thing is now I think people are beginning to see that you can do this stuff. It's not that hard. I mean, it's hard. It's harder than HTML. You know, it's hard to distribute this stuff, but you can do it. You can do it today with .NET. And I mean, yes, it puts you into the hands of the evil empire, but why doesn't somebody write something that makes a runtime instead of Linux, you know? I mean, somebody has to step up and do this thing. You know, oh, it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of coding and a lot of money. But that's what we have, is we have lots of work and time. And yes, ma'am?
I feel as though I'm in a different world here. You want a company in which to try out your ideas? I have one. My company's been, let's see, we're different. We're small, 190 people. We've been in business for 20 years. We are not in Silicon Valley. We own our little niche market. We have enough resources where we need now to change. And we are changing on a second product, how we do development, and it is a lot of upfront work with architects. No code has been written. We're going through everything, trying to understand what we want. Now, I don't know if we're typical. I mean, the fact we're small, the fact that I control it, and I'm a techie, means I'm sympathetic with all of this sort of thing. Maybe there are other companies like mine. The fact that we have been around for a while means we have the resources. We have the money and time to do this. A startup may not. I mean, you got to pay your bills. We have enough money to pay our bills. So it's the company that's at a stage where you're pretty successful in this area, but you know if you don't get better, in 5 years you'll be out of business because we have to change. We develop software the way we did 20 years ago. We still have spaghetti code. There's a lot of bad stuff, but we have the opportunity. We also treat our people right. People love to come to work at our company. I'm not doing a sales job, but we just won an award for being a great place to work. So there are a lot of bad places, but there are some good places, I'm sure, and small enough that they can actually try to embrace something different.
Well, there you have it.
So I don't know.
There's your proof.
Yeah. Right.
It can
but
work.
You need a few more. You need a few more. Where are you?
Is there a mic back here? Yes, sir.
I'm looking at your concept here of architects and programmers, but I haven't seen programmers be fully functionalized, idealized in your sense. That I'll see a programmer be 20% user, 70% programmer, and 10% engineer. What happens when your team is dynamic like that, when your members don't play a pure role? How does your organization function?
In my experience, people who can span those disciplines tend to be tend to either really work well in an academic environment, or work well as a mentor, or work as an entrepreneur. But if I build a company, I don't want people who can do a little of this and a little of that. I want people who are awesome, truly awesome, at doing one thing. I want world class. And so I would like to find an engineer who does engineering. I mean, most engineers can also, keep the books of the company. But having them keep the books of the company is pretty darn stupid. It's wasteful of their talent. And having an engineer do production programming is wasteful of that engineer's talent, if that engineer is truly talented. And so I would never presume to insult that engineer by asking him or her to do production code or to do user interface. Because I don't believe that really good engineering involves user interface. Okay? And I feel the same way about programmers. I wouldn't insult a programmer by asking the programmer to do architectural work. Not that they couldn't, but it's a waste of their time. I could have them sweep up after everybody goes home at night, too, and they'd be really good at it. You know, but it's an inappropriate thing to have them do. This is my vision, and I know there are a lot of people in our industry who believe that it's not just the right, but the duty of every programmer to have their finger in every pie. And to them, I say, great, I'm looking forward to competing with you. That's how I feel. I think writers write. I think programmers program. I think engineers engineer. Engineers are the kind of guys who love to solve problems and move on, solve problems and move on. And programmers are the kind of people who like to build. And architects are the people who like to envision and talk to people who will use the fruits of their vision. And I want to get all three of those talents together and have them work collaboratively. But I don't want to have them sharing their responsibilities. And again, that's a philosophical point, and you are welcome to disagree with me. Who has the next mic?
I
We've
think
got
we
5 more
have
minutes.
time. We have
Oh,
about,
you want to call time? I was going to go to 9.
Why don't we do that?
Okay.
Then we have to be out of here.
Then they throw us out.
Right.
Then they turn off the virtual reality machine, and
So
all the air comes
Yeah.
out. And
I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about how the architect works with the programmer. Sorry, not the programmer. What's the other one?
well, there's programmers, engineers, and architects.
Right, engineers and architects. You say they sit down together and they come up with a prototype before they ever start writing production code. What does that look like, and when does this usability specialist interact with them?
I don't know. Let me rephrase that. I know. But I don't know to my satisfaction. This is one of the things at Cooper. I've spent 10 years doing a lot of interaction design for hire and teaching people to do interaction design for hire. And we've really perfected that. And one of the really difficult things that the industry has found hard to swallow is that doing that, and doing that well, without compromise, is expensive. And virtually none of our clients have been willing to pay for the collaborative phase. So now, there's some ambient level of collaboration in the industry, okay? And what was missing was the interaction design. People going off and studying the user and understanding goals and synthesizing solutions out of modeling tools. And so that's what we concentrated on. And so for the first many years of developing this process, I was very content with the idea that they would let me go off and design without being interrupted by collaboration. Okay? But as we began to perfect our abilities to we could come in and we could do great design, but then there was this sort of waterfall thing where you hand the design off. And we were pleased to a large extent because we felt that we were giving them it's like giving your kid an Ivy League education, and it sets him or her up for a good life. And so that's what we would do, is we would give them a good design. But the fact is, it would then go into the hands of people who had to build it. And the thing about software, an architect's blueprints on the building site cover most of the problems. And when the builders, find a couple of walls that don't meet, they go and ask for clarification. But when programmers who are under insane pressure, when they encounter a couple of walls that don't match, they go, does anybody know how to make these? Oh, okay, here's how we do it. We'll put up a dialog box and ask the user, and that's, that's about how long they give it. So the thing is that what is clearly necessary is a collaboration, is this ongoing collaboration. And we have done a very little bit of it, and we have not done enough of it so that I feel good about it. And I haven't seen enough of it out there in the industry to give me any confidence that anybody else has any experience in how to do it. Not that people haven't gone out there and collaborated, okay, and not that there isn't a lot known about it, but I have very high standards. Okay? I want to do the finest world-class interaction design possible. And that's what the people in my organization do, and we hold them to those standards. And now I want to find those same standards in terms of collaboration between architects and engineers and programmers. Now, here's what I believe, and actually one of the guys at my company, Jonathan Corman, really articulated this well. He said, during the design phase, during the architectural design phase, the architect drives the process, and the engineers and the programmers work for the architect. So that when the architect says, I wonder if we can have this entire data structure operating locally, and can we achieve adequate performance? An engineer leaps into the fray and says, yes, sir, I am going to build a prototype tonight, a little test. You know, we're going to send 100,000 messages back and forth and see, time it out, and get some empirical evidence to see if this will work. Otherwise, we have to look for some different architectural solutions, okay? And I don't see this as prototyping for user interface. I see it as prototyping as prototypes, the real meaning of prototype, which is a concept, a proof of concept, and a technical proof, which is the role, I believe, of prototypes. And then there comes a transition phase where the architects and the programmers have solved all the technical problems and all the user problems and all the design problems that are known. And now it goes into construction. And now there's this handoff where not only the blueprints and the little proof of concept, you know, example, here's how you engineer it kind of stuff, gets handed to the production programmers. But at this point, there's this switch in who works for who. And so all of a sudden now the architects and the engineers work at the beck and call of the programmers. So that when the programmers are sitting there going, well, these walls, you know, don't meet exactly, what they can do is they can immediately turn around and summon an architect who will hop to it and say, here's how we can resolve this problem really simply without putting up a dialog box or, you know, or just saying, no, sorry, you can't do it, or push submit. Thank you. It's a gratuitous slam in browsers.
Okay, we have time. I'm very pained to be cutting off this discussion because
Me too.
Yes, it's been great.
Thank you. Thank you.
But before we're going to have one last question. Oops, they're turning off the lights. One last question, and I wanted to sort of thank everybody for participating.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
Alan
you.
for joining us, for doing this great presentation.
Thank you.
And for being so provocative, and for another great discussion. Come back in January for Dick Gabriel. Bill?
So one thing that struck me throughout this discussion was that essentially what you're doing is you're moving a lot of the effort to the front of the development process and spending a lot of your resources on user interaction design. And the one nice thing about that is that it results in better software. But it also means that more of your resources are expended in a place where your competitors can see and immediately copy them. If I spend most of my resources on something that that's immediately visible to my competitors and within 6 months they can duplicate, I've made the initial investment, I've built the factory, they get the benefit. How do you make an economically sustainable company with this focus?
A superb question. A superb question. And as I've said many, many times over the years, the day you ship your product is the day you publish your blueprints for your competitors. Okay, so I absolutely agree with this. Here's what I have come to realize. Now, I think in absolute, so I know that there are exceptions to this rule. Okay, so please understand the rhetoric here. But I do not believe that there are any companies out there that care enough about doing things of the quality that I'm focusing on, that I'm aiming at, that they can do it. That even if they have the blueprints, you know, one of my favorite quotes, I can't attribute it because I don't know, some admiral said, you know, about an American aircraft carrier. He said, it's so complex and so dangerous that we could give it with all the planes and all the people to the Russians and they'd blow themselves up with it before they could figure out how to use it. That's a Cold War metaphor. But I think it's really true, which is I think that if I were to build my product, to release first customer ship, and then hand it to Bill Gates, I don't think he could get it out the door at his company. Because I don't think that they have the culture to make that happen. So somebody once said, don't hide your ideas. If they're any good, you're going to have to beat people over the head with them. I do believe that what you have to do is not rest on your laurels. So here's the plan. This is what you have to do. You create something fantastic, and then you ship it. And you stun and shock your competition because they're all out chasing each other's tails. Okay? And then, with the revenue stream you get from that, you'd better do it again. Otherwise, they are going to catch up to you. The thing about if you were to, say, for example, compete with Microsoft, they would come after you with all of their, 800-pound gorilla-ness. Okay? Now, the one thing they can't do is make software that people will love. Okay? But what they can do is they can apply all sorts of other, economic and social pressure. But the thing is if you create something that people will love, you will create a moment in time and space and in your bank account where you can move on and create something else that people will love. And call me an idealist, but I do believe that, that the companies that make software that people love are going to kick Microsoft's butt.